So this is a little bit of a weird one. I just went through the Empire list of the 100 greatest films. The way they do the ranking, it's the 100 greatest in 21st century, and in terms of Star Wars, it's really interesting because they put Force Awakens at number 48. Now, I'm probably the last person to say we should do gatekeeping or pay attention to culture in terms of, reader response or audience response or critical response. But I'm looking at this more from a friendly point of view because I've noticed that I do have at least a few British listeners, and I'm always like, I'm always fascinated because I do know a little bit about British film and British culture. And Empire is a British magazine. In the States, we don't usually have access to too much of British media, but Empire is a magazine I've been able to get a hold of here and there. And so I haven't been able to look at every issue, but for the last 3 years, I've been able to get issue here and there. So I think I have a feeling for how the critics are and the readers are in terms of the letters and the feedback they get. And I'm pretty stunned because, at least for Americans, the prequels have really gone up in estimation, but neither Attack of the Clones nor Revenge of the Sith are anywhere on the top 100. And I'm like, okay, well, that's understandable. Maybe the prequels are just still not really affecting a lot of British readers or Empire's readers or the critics they have working for them. But in terms of what my current concerns are, I'm really surprised The Last Jedi is also not on the list. And I wanted to do that more in terms of Mahler, because Mahler is a British critic. Be technical, he's Welsh, actually. But it's interesting that one of Mahler's things is to keep ragging on critics. He actually has this little cute segment, which I agree with, at the beginning of his Force Awakens video, where he plays clips for tons of critics or tons of YouTubers. And they're like, we love Force Awakens, JJ has safe start. He's really just mocking this. He's not even giving any commentary. It's just so obvious the way they're really praising the film. Well, that just shows they're not serious. They don't know anything what they're talking about. Well, Last Jedi is universally, this is an objective fact. So many critics really, really like it. So many critics really rank it very high as the Star Wars films, even among so-called diehard fans. A lot of them do. Like Mark Riley puts it at number 2 on his top 10. So there are, quote, real fans and a lot of real critics who really love it, but it's nowhere on the list. Now, how they broke down the list is not completely explained. It seems to be a mix of, they get the reader feedback, their critics, I guess they try to harmonize or equalize the votes. So it could be that at least some of the critics did like Last Jedi. Actually, a person wrote an article on it giving his pro argument, but maybe they were just outvoted. But still, it's really stunning that it's not even in top 100 at all. It's not even 99, 98. Nothing. It didn't even make the list, and Force Awakens is at 48, which I think at that level, it's really too generous. I mean, I myself really like Force Awakens. I do think there's a lot of great stuff, but the reasoning behind it is a little puzzling to me. I really want to get some feedback from some of the British listeners as well as American listeners, because it's sort of like the way we're describing it was well, this is pure Star Wars. It's very energetic. It has a lot of energy. It's very kinetic and all that, and that's kind of the good bad thing about JJ's style. It is a very kinetic style, but it's kind of like, what do you mean by pure Star Wars? It seems like, again, there's this implication that the prequels were like this dark ages that we emerged from slowly, but The Force Awakens was finally a great shot in the arm. And I'd agree with that, but to me, more and more, it seems like a really big candy bar. It's really enjoyable, but the more you go into it, it's like, there's really not much here. There's not much, in terms of depth. There's just it was fun. It's enjoyable. It actually had a very big impact on my life, really. But I have to say, taking my own subjectivity out of it, it's a good film. It's well made. It has a lot of great moments in it, but it does feel over and over again this is just going for crowd-pleasing moments. But the story and script is not that strong. The direction is good in some places, but the camera angles are more or less the same thing over and over again. He plays to some very obvious iconography, so I can see why it would make the list, and it's obviously good that it is, quote, top 40s. But again, in terms of the British audience, I'm always really surprised, because definitely I would understand that Christopher Nolan would make it on the list, but he has so many spots on the list, it's insane, and that I don't think is objectively true. I don't think he made that many great films within even the 21st century. I mean, it's yes, he's had some strong ones early on following Memento and things like that, but I think his output has always been much more erratic, so there's definitely some bias, but I definitely find that the Star Wars coverage with Empire really puzzling, because they recently gave Rise of Skywalker 3 stars. It's nowhere on the list at all as well. But it's what people think, well, that's a little too recent. they already have Joker on the list. So it's like, so even the reasoning behind how did they get the list, who generates the list is, it's a little puzzling to me. So I'm just going to throw it back to the listeners as people who have, done comments for some of these videos. What do you think? Is this a good ranking? Is it a fair ranking? Is it an objective ranking, to use Mauler terminology? Is Force Awakens at 48 a little too high, or is it a little too low? Would you place it a lot higher or lower? If I had to put it on the list, if I had to really be brutal and put it like a top 100, I'd probably still rank it pretty high like they do, but probably more like at 57, 58, 59. I definitely do think it's a good film, and if you're going to go by 21st century, yeah, you'd still rank it pretty high, but still, I don't know, 48, there just seem to be so many better films than that, and I would include Last Jedi. I think it's a much, much stronger film, so it's a big puzzle. So I just wanted to do this more connection with the Mauler videos, because, Mauler always goes on about the corruption of critics, and that they're being sold out, and they're not giving the real opinion. Well, a lot of critics love Last Jedi. It still did not make the top 100 in your own home country. So I put it back saying, no, it's not bought off. I mean, a lot of critics really honestly like it. They're not liking it because they hate Star Wars, or they don't know what a good film is. They do honestly like it. So, but there you go. Even with all that, the critics apparently were not strong enough to outrun the readers in this case. Maybe the readers were like lukewarm at best, saying, yeah, we like Last Jedi, it's fine. But Force Awakens is just much more resonating with the British audience, whether it's the Daisy factor, they have so many British actors. I don't know, maybe it's because they had Han, the more fan favorite people. I don't know, it's an interesting question. So what do you think? Is the 48 a good ranking, or is it too high or too low? Please let me know in the comments below. This has been Star Wars Analyzed on the Empire 100 and the Star Wars Connection. Star Wars Analyzed. If you like the content, please like or subscribe below. Thank you very much.